You need a lawyer, right? You need marketing experts. You need to understand sales, your business model, so many things. It's not a one-man job. And when you're a startup, usually you have that lack of funding to actually hire a big team to help you with everything. So this is where we come in, right? You will see a lot of workshops like this happening in our community, all for free once you join, and also open for public sometimes like this one. And then you also have one-on-one sessions. I personally do growth hacking and marketing sessions with our startups, sit with them one-on-one and like see whatever they need. What happened to your website? What happened to your app? Why no sales? How do we boost it? How do you optimize? You know what? Try this on your Facebook ads, change this, change that, and so on. Now, moving forward from that, you made your own company. You want to make your own content, YouTube, video, audio, whatever. You go to In5 Media. We have production studios there at your service. You can make your own podcast in recording studios. There are green rooms. You can make visual effects, whatever you want, make your own videos, make your own ads. If you go to In5 Design, we have a prototyping lab. You have a whole army of 3D printers, laser cutting, create your hardware product there. We also have the fashion lab. If you have a dress idea or any fashion idea, we help you create small quantities to test the market. And here, finally, In5 Tech, you have this lovely venue, a lot of training rooms, workshops. We have the assembly here who helps us in advising in all tech matters that you have. Want to build a software, want to build an app, want to build a website, we're all here for you. Now, given said that, if you have any questions about In5, we can go ahead. Any questions? All good? All right.
No, the mic is, so we're not actually.
Yeah, it's a fake mic. It's on purpose.
Pretty intimate session here, so we figured we'd just speak.
Yeah, just recording the session.
Because we're also streaming it onto YouTube, so we're just trying to experiment with different ways.
Okay.
That's fine. Like, I think hopefully once Steve. Yeah.
Say you're from continuing on talking, then yeah, just kind of like I'm assuming.
Yeah, we've got another slide. So
Okay.
we do have that. I'll just hang it there. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Of course, we're very grateful to In5. In5, I think we've been here since the start. Like, well, I'm trying to put an exact date on it. I think it was 2014, and we've been doing these sessions since 2014 when In5 started off, and we're very happy that we actually have our lab upstairs. You can maybe, if some of you are up there, you can see the 3D printers and everything later on, and the robots and everything. We've been doing this since 2014, as I mentioned. It's only recently that we've come back on live. During the lockdown, of course, we did take everything online, but this feels like 2019. I'm so glad, and I say that in a good way. And of course, things are different, but we're very happy that everyone showed up. And we're going to keep doing these sessions. We've got one, I think the next one is on 26th. So we do vary the time, but generally they're going to be on a Saturday. And we are going to cover more technical topics. We try to cover exponential technology. I mean, so a whole bunch of things like data science, IoT. So we do hands-on sessions also in some of these. So definitely feel free to check out our site. I just have to I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of web links, but if you want to find us on social media, you can find us at Make Smart Things. So Make Smart Things is our mission statement, as well as our social media handle. We post a lot of content there, so you can follow everything on there. Without further ado, after that, I do want to directly get to Steve. So I've been following Steve. I've not, I think, probably met for this time, but I've been following what he's been doing online for the past few years, and he's been doing it since before it was a buzzword, and so that's why I don't use the word pioneer lightly, because he's done a lot of stuff specifically in the field of education, but we're all going to be entering the metaverse, aren't we? So it's very important. And these are two different technologies, and Steve's going to tell you how it converges into that. Steve's got a lot of background. I'm going to let him tell you more about his background, but suffice to say, he knows what he's talking about. And we're very glad to have him. And thank you, Steve, for doing this for us. And we're very grateful. And we definitely hope you guys get a lot out of this session. And we hope to hear some feedback. And we hope to stay in touch with you also. So I'm going to pass it on to Steve directly. Thanks, Steve. Get directly on.
Quite noisy, but can you guys hear me at the back? All good? Actually, it's been a while since I've been in a setting this intimate. I like it like this. The last stage I was on was the size of a small ship. But honestly, at some point, if you are struggling to hear what I'm saying at the back, please do tell us. Just shout at me, and I'm sure the guys can do something. I am mic'd up, but as he was just explaining, the micing is because they're recording the audio stream. I've also got to be careful not to walk there because I'm going to end up blinding myself off the giant projector. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to the In5 guys for inviting me as well. My name is Steve Banbury. A little bit about me. I've been here in Dubai since 2008, and I've been working in the field of learning, I think is the best term to sum it all up, for about 2 decades now, which makes me feel super old, especially with my birthday next week. I'm the former head of digital innovation. I was actually the first head of digital innovation across the GES Dubai School Group. That was a job that was created for me. The new director at the time, Mark Steed, who will pop up once later in this event, but Mark was in the job for a month and came to me and he said, "Oh, you're kind of wasted just doing this, Steve. What about I create a job for you that's like across the whole company and going out and speaking at events and building the brand and looking at different ways that we can innovate with different types of technology. Do you want that job?" And I went, "Yeah, it sounds good." And that was my interview. Ended up doing that for the last 3 years. And then in 2019, I decided I needed a fresh challenge and went into consultancy. Of course, this turned out to be the single worst time in the last century to walk away from a salary, because a couple of months later, the world fell apart. But continued to innovate, continued to do a lot of interesting things, especially with the Sharjah government. In the course of my career, I've won awards from Apple and Microsoft and BET and Guess and all kinds of different things. I host stages at GITEX and at Guess. And as it comes to, I think I've got a laser pointer in here somewhere. I like laser pointers. There we go. As it comes to XR, extended reality, immersive technology, and don't panic if you're a little fuzzy on all the different terminology, we will cover that. I've been playing around with that stuff since about 2012. Virtual reality, got my first headset in 2014. I actually wrote a course for Apple in 2015 called a Virtual World Tour, which was a little bit ahead of its time. What's weird though, guys, is in the last year in particular, my path has kind of split. Now, as I said, it's my birthday next week. I'm a Gemini, so I'm kind of destined to be, I think, 2 different people at the same time. But these days, as I am still Steve Banbury, award-winning educator and immersive technology consultant, but the mad thing is that these days I'm also this mad little alien. And people tend to know me as Desert Minter as well, because I went down a rabbit hole of Web3, NFTs, and blockchain last year. Thank you to my dear friend, Dr. Jeremy Williams, who was an executive director at GEMS at the time, and he's now working for a Web3 startup in New York. But yeah, I actually feel like I've got 2 different personalities these days. I've got my kind of business head, and then I've got my NFT project manager, Web3 consultant kind of head. My little alien boy here, Yoshin, if you're an OG in the NFT space, you will, of course, know the Alien Boy project. He has kind of become synonymous with me and this new quote-unquote brand. So I'm going to get Yoshin to help me out through this first section. I was asked for the first section of this event today to cover what is Web3. Just a little question then. The problem with that is that there is so much different terminology. There's so many buzzwords, and a good friend of mine, Alvin Graylin, who again you'll see him later on, Alvin once said to me that the biggest problem with new forms of technology like VR is that people don't know what they don't know. Terminology scares people, and new ideas scare people, and we generally want to stay in our comfort zones. So what I'm going to do, me and Yoshin, the alien boy, we're going to blast through some of these terms. We're going to try and demystify them a bit for you. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that there's probably some people sitting in the room right now who work in this space a little bit already, maybe work in this space fully. So I like to wander when I'm on stage, and I have to wander back here a little bit to avoid the projector. I'm conscious of the fact that some of you might already know the answers to what some of these things are. I'm actually not going to do all of them. I'm going to do the ones that I think are the most important, and we're going to do some of them a little bit later as well, instead of during this first section. But even if you do know what these terms mean, I'm hoping that you'll still get something out of this. I'm hoping that I'll be able to break it down in a way that you will have this crystal clear way that you can then explain it to somebody else outside of the space, that you can make it crystal clear to somebody that doesn't understand what Web3 is or what an NFT is. And on that note, Yojin, what you got for me? First question. What exactly are NFTs? Seems to be the most common question in the last 12 months. NFTs blew up in 2021. What exactly are NFTs? NFT stands for non-fungible token. There's 3 words there, and one of them tends to be the bit that we all get stuck on. One of them tends to be the word that everyone thinks somebody made up. One of them tends to be the word that Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel make jokes about on a regular. And that's fungible, obviously. It is a real word, apparently. None of us knew what it was before. Simply put, a fungible asset is something where the units can be interchanged. Best example I can give you is dirhams, or any type of currency, money. If I pull 10 dirhams out of my pocket right now and gave it to you, and you gave me 2 5 dirhams back, or 10 dirhams back, we've got exactly the same value. 1 10 dirham is worth exactly the same as any other 10 dirham. Something that is fungible is interchangeable. Something that's non-fungible has unique properties and it cannot be interchanged. Great example, the Mona Lisa. Okay? Now, you can take a photo of the painting. You can go on Google and download a copy of the painting, but there is only one Mona Lisa hanging in the Louvre. And what's been really interesting in the NFT space, particularly when it was really kicking off last year, is the rise of the right-click save movement. People were sharing the NFTs that they bought or traded, and someone outside of the space would jump in their comments and go, ha, 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 I just right-click and saved it and stole it, and now I own it. But they don't. There's a bit more to it than that. It is true that NFTs blew up last year. The money that was changing hands was bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. And to the untrained eye, it looks like a bubble. It looks like a gimmick. It looks kind of insane when a picture of a monkey, an ape, is selling for $1 million. But it is more than just the cartoon characters. The reason people were investing in these projects and these teams is because they understood the underlying premise of the technology and the underlying promise of the technology and what it has to do. Because essentially, what we're talking about with NFTs is we're talking about digital authenticity, using blockchain technology to prove authenticity, to prove ownership, to prove that this cat right here, which I own actually, and I call Bernard sometimes, Bernard the cat here, there is only one of him. You can take a copy of it, I'd happily give you a copy of it, but on the chain, on the blockchain, there is only one, and that is in my wallet. Just like there is only one Mona Lisa and it's hanging in the Louvre. And this underpins everything that makes NFTs special, and it's what's underpinning the evolution in content creation. It's important to understand as well that NFTs don't have to just be pixelated animals or cartoon characters. NFTs can take any form of digital media. We're talking photography, music, film, animations, assets for games like wearables for characters, domain names like this one here that I own. And virtual land has obviously become a huge thing, especially in the last couple of months. The idea of owning plots in the quote-unquote metaverse. And again, we'll stick a pin in that and come back to it as well. Just quick check at the back. You hear me okay, yeah? Sweet. Maybe towards the end, maybe my voice will die out a bit, but I'm generally pretty loud. This data was just shared this week. This is hot off the press from the crypto report earlier this week. $3.9 billion from content creators inside the NFT space, which is nowhere near as much as Facebook and YouTube. But when you look at the average that they made per creator in the NFT space, in the Web3 space, 174,000 average, 636 on Spotify, and just 10 cents on average on Facebook. We are early, but there is some crazy advantages to being part of such an innovative space during such a nascent period. Okay, next question, Yojin. So what is this blockchain thing anyway? Guys, this is probably the most common question right now. And again, literally this morning watching Stephen Colbert on The Late Show, making jokes about the fact that nobody understands what the blockchain is. The crazy thing is that these days, for every person that asks How does the blockchain work anyway? Nobody asks this anymore, do they? How does the internet work? You just use it. You all just use the internet. But when the internet was born, people wanted to understand it. People wanted to ask questions about it. And now we just kind of accept it. You think about the fact that kids are now born as digital natives. They don't necessarily ask, how does the internet work? How does the web work? All they want to know is how to get onto YouTube and then how to get onto TikTok. But how does the internet work was a question that people used to ask a lot, and now people want to understand blockchain, which is reasonable. It makes sense. It's just like a decade ago when everybody was freaking out about the cloud. Oh, the cloud, we don't understand the cloud. What is the cloud? Everyone had this ethereal concept of the cloud. All of our data is up in the cloud, when in actual fact, the cloud, it's not quite as sexy. It looks like Sainsbury's, all right? It looks like a supermarket, because basically what we're talking about is just great big data centers that are storing our information on these rows. To be fair, this looks a bit sexier, doesn't it? Because this looks like X-Files or something. But the problem with that, it was an answer to a problem. The problem was that we were storing our data locally, and then you lost your laptop, you lost all your stuff. You had your laptop targeted by a virus, you lost all access to your stuff, or potentially worse. So the cloud came along as a solution for us to store things remotely, or in actual fact, to let big tech store stuff for us. And most of us were using the cloud before we even realized it. As much as, Jess, the school I worked at, we were real front runners with cloud technology. We moved into Google Apps in 2011. And at the time, we launched iPads in the classroom and Google Apps. And iPads people went crazy for, and Google Apps nobody understood. They just couldn't get the concept. It was a little bit early for them. But the point, the simple fact is that before that even happened, most of you were already on Facebook. And most of you were letting Facebook store your pictures. And I'll put my hand up. I don't use Facebook very much. And in my time, the main reason I used Facebook was as a free place to store my pictures. I was basically giving my data to Facebook. And I think at this point, we all know that that didn't go so well. It wasn't the best answer, was it, to how to store data? So along comes the blockchain as a potential solution, as a step forwards from having stuff just on your device to letting Google and Facebook and Microsoft look after it for you and hoping that they'll play nice with it or not go out of business or not be somewhat irresponsible with your data. Along comes the blockchain. And yes, very much like 20 years ago when people were saying, what's the internet? It is a little bit complicated. I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible for you. I'm not going to do a massive deep dive on how blockchain technology works. There's not time and there's not really much point. I'm going to try and just give it to you in 3 simple slides. Okay? Blockchain is a digital ledger. Understand, like a ledger? Okay, a record. Record of transactions is distributed across the entire network. So rather than, go back 1 slide, rather than all of your stuff being centrally stored by Google, it's spread across all of the computers on the network, which are called nodes. Each block in the chain, hence the name blockchain, contains a number of different transactions, and a record of every transaction is added to that ledger. Every single thing that happens on the chain is recorded, and it's on every single computer. Okay? Blockchain chain transactions are recorded with this immutable cryptographic signature, which is called a hash. Okay, so thinking about my alien boy Yojin, you can go back, you can find him on chain, you can find the moment that I bought him, you can find the moment that I minted him last year. Everything that happens is on the chain, everything that happens on the chain is recorded and permanent. Now, I'm a huge fan of the work of Simon Sinek, in particular his golden circle principle of start with the why. Don't start with what you're going to do or how you're going to do it, but start with why you're going to do it. And I've thrown this at schools that I've worked with over the years and companies that I've worked with over the years, time and time and time again. Because when it comes to technology, and I'm going to say it, when it comes to technology here in the UAE, quite often we want shiny things. We want nice shiny things and we want headlines, and we don't necessarily think about why we're doing things. We just want it to look nice. We want it to sound cool. But it's super important that you start with the why. So why blockchain? I can give you 3 right off the bat. Number 1, security. It's so much more difficult, and in some cases impossible, to change or hack or alter the system when it comes to blockchain. It's transparent, so everyone can see and track what's going on. Okay, when something happens on chain, it's a lot easier to see what's going on as compared to if your data is all being stored by the likes of Google. And as I mentioned previously, the immutability, the fact that all validated records are irreversible, and you have this permanent record of what's happening. So essentially, this is my real why for blockchain. It means that instead of one company or one database holding all of that data, it is spread out across the network. And this, my friends, is the root of decentralization. Okay, so what is Web3? To understand Web3, we need to go back to Web 1. And yes, that is the actual Apple website when it first launched. And yes, this is the actual Amazon website when it first launched. These are not jokes. That's what Apple thought that their brand should look like. So the initial form of the World Wide Web, we're talking 90s. We're talking primitive. It's very passive. It's very information based. You know, I know from I'm old enough to remember having to tell my parents that I wanted to use the internet to make sure nobody picked the phone up, because if they picked the phone up, you got cut off. Having to plug the router in, wait for it to connect, then connect to a browser, then type in the address, and then watch as the page loaded like this. That was Web 1. It is also the time when e-commerce kicked off, you know, the birth of online shops in their simplest form. And blogging, to a degree, was born in this era as well. We then evolved in the late 2000s, mid to late 2000s, into what is now referred to as Web 2, the first major evolution of the web, when social media platforms like Facebook, I think we skipped past MySpace, but yeah, when Facebook and Twitter, later Instagram, and obviously these days TikTok, rose with a greater focus on content creation and creating and writing content, and interacting became more important as well. It wasn't just that you went online to look at stuff, it was that you went online to engage with people, and it became more of a dialogue and more of a back and forth. There was also obviously the birth of the cloud around this era, and the birth of live streaming as well. Now don't get me wrong, guys, this is still where we're at. If anyone's reading newspaper articles and they're going, oh, it's the era of Web3, it really isn't yet. Okay, we are heading in that direction, and we are dropping pebbles into a lake right now and making ripples. But if you think about the initial iteration of the web was the 90s. This was, Facebook's what, 2006, 2007? There was a good decade, 15 years between them, and we are now just starting to edge into the beginning of a new era, and that new era is Web 3, which is the next major evolution of the web, built on the chain with a focus on ownership and decentralization, as we just talked about. It's more community driven, and obviously there's this intersection with immersive technology with XR, which we'll come back to. Now, I've seen so many different versions of this in the last couple of months, where people try to boil down Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. I've seen it done like this. This is not my terminology down the bottom here. I've seen various people describe it as the move from the information economy to the platform economy to the ownership economy. A good friend of mine, Maria Galanis from the States, she was on a panel discussion I hosted recently online, and what she said I thought was quite cute, because she was like, oh, it's read, write, own. And I think we like to package stuff up in neat little parcels, don't we, where we sum it all up. But I would just be a little cautious of trying to boil things down into these little morsels that you can feed to the general public. I mean, there were people in the early stages of the internet blogging. They were creating content. People were creating websites. They were creating online stores. You kind of had the ability to own stuff in Web 2, but it is slightly different. So I just would be cautious in terms of how diluted we make our definitions. There's definitely merit to referring to it as the information economy, the platform economy, although I know this sometimes is referred to as the creators economy, you know, the birth of content creators through social media, and now the ownership economy. But even this, I feel, distills it a little bit too much. There's more to blockchain and NFTs and all of this stuff than just, I own an NFT, I own a digital asset. There's a lot more going on under the hood, as you'll see when we take a bit of a deep dive into the education sector. And we are still super, super early. Now, two things. This here, the purple across the bottom, this is the first timeline. At the top is the other timeline. This confused the living daylights out of me when I first saw this. But then the penny dropped. So you've got the orange from 1990, which is internet users. Okay, you can see the growth in the number of internet users. And what they did is they mapped this against the current Web3 users. But if you notice that this is 2016 as a starting point, but it is quite uncanny if you look how parallel these lines are becoming here. And if you think, and you then scroll up, this gives you an idea in terms of Web3. We're kind of at the 1995 stage of things. And if you can remember that far back, then you're as old as me, but also you'll appreciate how far we've got to come. If you can remember what the internet was like in 1995 and how primitive it was, it really will tell you how far we've come into this Web3 movement already, but how much further we've still got to go. Right, Yoshin's next question is the biggie, is the buzzy. So then, what is the metaverse? So the metaverse is a term originally coined by Neil Stephenson in his awesome book, Snow Crash. Can't recommend that book enough. If you love sci-fi and you haven't read Snow Crash, go to Borders after this and go buy Snow Crash. It became even more popular because Ernie Klein took it into Ready Player One, which itself is a fantastic book, especially if you grew up in the 80s. Ignore all the sci-fi stuff, the 80s references are just exquisite. And obviously Ready Player One got a lot more attention when Spielberg made a movie based on it. Really became a buzz term in 2021 with Facebook's rebranding to Meta, which is something I still wish that I'd put a bet on because I called that 3 years earlier. But the dictionary, I say dictionary, you know, the definition on paper of the metaverse is in yellow at the top up there, guys. A virtual reality space in which users can interact with a computer-generated environment and other users. I boil it down to these 4 words, okay? For me, this is something that I can boil down because I've worked with this technology for a number of years now. It should be persistent, it should be connected, it needs to be multi-user, and virtual reality is a key component of it. And of these 4 things, right now, all of these people buzzing around metaverse and, oh, we're going in the metaverse, let's do the metaverse. There's 2 that I think get forgotten and overlooked, or, you know, oh, we'll come back to that bit. They get left aside a little bit. Number 1, connected, and number 2, virtual reality. The vision of the metaverse is not silos. It's not, we've built the metaverse, and it's actually just the game that people can buy assets for. Or we've built the metaverse, and it's just a VR training simulation. The idea of the metaverse is kind of like Ready Player One. It's like the Matrix, but without the things stuck in the back of our necks and the terrifying robots and the agents trying to shoot you. Okay, there is this concept of everything being connected in one space. And virtual reality is an integral part of this. And that's why these aren't the metaverse. Minecraft, Fortnite, these are not the metaverse. These are games. Okay, yes, they're multiplayer games. Okay? But they're not games that you can access as a persistent virtual space. Now, to be fair, Microsoft did give it a real good shot to launch Minecraft VR, and it was not a big success, and also one of the worst VR experiences I've probably ever had, when I suddenly floated into the air and felt incredibly sick. Are these going to move into that space? Quite possibly. I'd say it's very, very likely, but it's very important that we have this understanding that a metaverse should be a persistent space. It should be always on. It shouldn't be just something I load up. It's eternally there and present. It should be something that is connected, and this is the real secret sauce, to connect your metaverse to other metaverses, which is super, super difficult because we live in an era where money rules everything. Look at Apple and Android, Apple and Google. They're never going to play nice together. Microsoft won't play nice with Amazon. All of these companies will want to have their control over this space, and whether or not they can connect the dots is going to be imperative. It needs to be multi-user. It needs to have a virtual reality component, and we really will dive into that and the whole metaverse idea a bit later on. But this is a very, very, very common question that I get asked these days, and I would say this is the #1 misconception right now. So Yoshin's question: so is the metaverse the same thing as Web3? Are you ready for the answer? No. Let's make that super clear. No, it's not the same thing, okay? Now, I mentioned this guy earlier on, Alvin. Love him dearly. Alvin Graylin, he's the president of HTC Vive over in China. I've had the honor of sharing the virtual stage with Alvin as far back as 2018. Dude has sent me VR headsets before they were even released in this country. Got a lot of time for him, and I love the fact that Alvin is always engaged with the community. I made this joke on stage a few years ago about the fact that you wish that someone like Zuckerberg would engage with his community the way that Alvin does, and he's constantly putting content out. And just last week he put this out, because obviously Alvin and HTC Vive, they've been working in this space for a long time. And what they're seeing is this rise of the Web3 community. And what I've been seeing, which is part of the reason I've ended up with these two different profiles, and I feel kind of like I'm splitting two people right now, is there's a real disparity between the Web3 community and the immersive technology community. Because the XR community have been working on all this stuff and heading towards this goal of the metaverse for years. And in the last 12 months, there's been this rise up of NFTs and Web3 and blockchain, and suddenly they have commanded that this is our goal, this is what we're doing. Now, what Alvin was saying in the post that he put out and shared with me last week is that there is an overlap, for sure. There's an overlap between what the metaverse is and what Web3 is, and that he does believe that that overlap will grow, but they are not the same thing. And again, what was super interesting for me last year, when Zuck obviously came out and announced this massive move, we're going to rebrand, we're all about the metaverse now, we're going to be called Meta, we're going to lead the way and all of this stuff. The Web3 community called for his head. Now, I'm no huge Zuckerberg fan. I will openly state I'm not a massive Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook fanboy, all right? But they were calling for his head. This is not our metaverse. He doesn't know what he's doing. And it really struck a chord with me. It just rung odd, because for a start, half the people in the Web3 community are younger than 20. And I'd say there's a fair proportion of them that 6 months earlier had never even heard the word metaverse. Whereas in 2013, Zuckerberg went to see this guy. Now, this guy is a legend in the VR space. Jeremy is another person I've had the absolute honor to share the virtual stage with and to do some work with. He's the founding director of Stanford's Virtual Human Interaction Lab, where he's worked for about 20 years, leading the field in terms of not only virtual reality, but how it affects us as human beings. Jeremy's book, Experience on Demand, is the seminal text on VR. I cannot recommend it enough. The first line in that book is this. That was 2013 when Zuckerberg, starting to hear all this stuff about VR, and this is pre-Oculus days, this is pre-Vive days, this is an era when headsets weren't massively available, but Jeremy obviously has his private lab set up with all kinds of crazy tech at Stanford. Zuckerberg decided, there's something in this, and as much as the Web3 community like to scream, well, all kinds of acronyms, but they love DYOR, do your own research. This is what he did. In 2013, he went to see Bailenson, and Bailenson put him on the plank. Now, this is a screenshot from the commercially available version of the plank. Some of you may have done it. You go into an elevator, it closes, the door opens, you're at the top of a high-rise tower, and there's a plank. Bailenson's got a supercharged version of this with fans, and the floor falls away, and it rumbles, and all this kind of stuff. 2013, Zuck goes to Stanford, tries this. He starts connecting with some of the best academic minds in the space to try and understand the power, purpose, and potential of VR as a medium, as an evolution of computing. And that led to this, him buying Oculus. And that led to this, the most memeable thing of 2021. It was just too easy, wasn't it, to just replace the picture. I've seen so many variations on that. But my point here, guys, is that this might not be everyone's vision of the metaverse. It might not be my vision of the metaverse, but I respected the fact that Zuckerberg did his own research. A decade, just under a decade, before most people in this space were even using the word or had even heard the term metaverse, he was going down this rabbit hole. He was finding the best minds on the planet and soaking up all of that information. One last question. I am aware of the fact that I'm kind of talking to myself here. Is all this Web3 and Metaverse stuff just a passing fad? Kind of a typical question for all new forms of tech. I'll give you double no. The top one here is something I've been saying for years now. Spatial computing is the next evolution of computing. And when I've been asked why, it's very simple. Our world, in case you haven't noticed, is 3D. So it makes sense for us as humans to engage with things in 3D. If I want to look at this coffee cup, I want to be able to look at it in 3 dimensions. I want to be able to move around it. I want to be able to move it around me. And the irony has been that in the last 20 years, 30 years even, as much as our laptops, our phones, our iPads have been our conduit towards digital content, at the same time, those black mirrors have been the barrier keeping us from them. Because it doesn't make sense for us to engage with, if any of you have ever engaged with a 3D object on an iPad, yeah, it's cool, but it just doesn't feel quite right when you're there trying to move it around and, this movement to make it bigger. Spatial computing makes sense. The more you're in it, the more you realize that. This is the reason so many car companies now are using VR for design, so that they can, their designers can work with creating in 3D, and then, reviewing in 3D. They can move it around, but they can also do so much more. They can break the laws of physics. They can pick the car up with their bare hands. Web3 is the natural next evolution of the web. Okay, it's going to rebalance that power dynamic. We've given far too much power, far too much data, far too much control over to Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, and not so much Elon, but if he would let us, but all of these people, Bezos, the big tech companies, they have absolutely dominated the space. And this is the Robin Hood moment. This is the revolution moment where we start to take control of the internet back to all of us, and to have more control over how we engage with each other and how we engage with digital content. And if you think it's a fad, by chance, Mullet, the guy in the Web3 space I'm connected with, happened to share this on Twitter yesterday, so I quickly added it as an extra slide. This is December 2000 from the Daily Mail in the UK. Classic. The internet's just a passing fad as millions give up on it. And I like the irony of the fact that there's some sort of cropped off article down here that says, now there's intelligent. It's not a fad, guys. This is an evolutionary technology, okay? And there is so much potential for these technologies. And particularly, if you think back to Alvin's Venn diagram, at that convergence between the two, sparks will fly. They really, really will. Now, at this point, we've covered Web3, NFTs, blockchain, the metaverse. I will go over later on in this session, I will do VR, AR, XR, spatial computing, this kind of stuff, and I will touch upon what a DAO is. I've deliberately not gone really into decentralized finance, Ethereum, cryptocurrency, and all that kind of stuff. I really think that that's a different session. I think that there's too much there to kind of to dive into that, and particularly because of the focus that we're going to have on education, it's kind of tangential. So apologies if you were turning up expecting me to explain how Ethereum works. I'll leave you to explore that yourself, although I have got some good recommendations coming up in terms of where you can look. That's the end for Yoshin's bit. I will just be Steve now. Yoshin's going away. Don't worry, he's got plenty of friends in my wallet. I am somewhat obsessed with the alien boys. If you don't have an alien boy, what are you doing? Don't get an alien boy. We are going to move on to the second chunk in this session, which is I'm going to talk specifically about education and Web3. This is actually a remix and an evolution of a presentation that Dr. Jeremy Williams and I delivered last November about how NFTs and Web3 can disrupt the education space. Now, I'm conscious of the fact I've talked for a little while now, you've been sitting for a little while now. Do we want to take a little break, or does anyone need a courtesy moment to go to the toilet or anything like that? No? We're all good? Awesome, I'll just keep going then. So yeah, we'll take a little deep dive into education. Obviously, I've got 2 decades worth of background in education. In terms of Web3 and NFTs, we've already seen in the last couple of years the way that they can disrupt the finance sector, the way they can disrupt art and music, and now gaming seems to be on the cusp of an absolute revolution through the use of blockchain and NFTs. But the simple fact is that if you ask me the question, what's coming next, the answer is everything. I mean, I mentioned at the start that, you know, the last stage I was on was this ridiculously like the size of a ship. It was for this big Travelport conference. And they invited me to speak to talk about how it was going to disrupt the travel industry. Ironically, I've never worked in the travel industry, which I did, you know, I was very open about. I said that as soon as I walked on stage. But there isn't an industry that isn't going to be affected by this stuff. There isn't an industry that isn't going to have some disruption, some redefinition, some revolution through the application of Web3. Oh, I actually didn't realize they set that up over there. Yeah, guys, there's apparently coffee and water over on the side if you want it. Please do help yourself. There isn't an industry that isn't going to be affected, and that does include education. This is a graphic that Jeremy and I found last year of education blockchain companies. It's very limited, very limited. I guarantee you, every year from now on, you could come back to this graphic, and the number of companies in each of these columns would probably be 2 to 3 times as many, at least, on an annual basis. What I want to talk about, when Jeremy and I presented this in November, we presented 5 ways that we felt that NFTs and Web3 could disrupt the education sector. I'm going to give you 10, okay? I've doubled it, doubling down, double or nothing. Quick swig of my coffee. Now, I do want to highlight as well the fact that I'm talking about all stakeholders here. I'm going to give you some that are going to disrupt education in terms of for students, some for teachers, educators, and then some at a more school or governance level. The first one's kind of obvious. And sitting at the back of the room over there, we've got this amazing student from Heartland International School, Yasmin. Yasmin, give us a wave. She's literally as far away from me as possible, as usual. Yasmin's going to come up shortly, and she's going to talk about her NFT project, projects, plural. But the ability for young content creators to harness NFT technology, blockchain technology, to find a medium to promote, to share their art, to potentially commercialize their art, to develop their entrepreneurial skills, to develop their understanding of things like marketing, PR, and also to develop their understanding of Web3 is huge. Okay, schools and students, they've got this massive opportunity right now. Every creative arts program, every music program suddenly has this global outlet that is a bit more potent than just having a carousel of images on your school's website that maybe 6 or 7 people look at. Number 2 is the impact on the curriculum. And I think that this is super, super important. The fact that in order for us to be, I was literally just talking to this gentleman over here, whose name I can't remember, but just before we started, and talking about the demand that is rising for people that understand how to use Unity and Unreal, but also things like how to write smart contracts on the blockchain, how to create NFTs. The demand in these sectors is rising. And in order for us to have students prepared for these, we do need to start adjusting the curriculum well in advance. It's the ultimate catch-22 of education, is that when something starts popping off, everyone suddenly we need more staff, we need more people to help us do this. But in order to do that, we probably should have been teaching kids about it 10 years ago. But it maybe didn't exist 10 years ago. So this sudden rush to change programs and redirect our education provision so that we've got people empowered to be able to move into these sectors, particularly at the higher education level, but even at a school level. We do need to look right now at subjects like computing, business studies, the way that NFTs are, figured into our art and design programs, even our music programs, our social studies programs. There's so many different ways that this stuff can be leveraged. And right now, we are missing the mark. This was shared by the Ed3 Educators group I think it was last week, maybe the week before. I can't see the date on that one. But it was sharing an article about NFT child artists. Obviously, we've got one sitting in the room with us. But what it was saying was that, we're not doing enough to support these guys. They're off doing all this amazing stuff on their own. How can we take what they're accomplishing and share it with other kids, share it with other schools, empower and inspire this generation to help them be prepared? It's also interesting that there's a lot of talk that blockchain will be taught, discreetly in classrooms in the next few years. And here's one from Forbes, and this is an interesting one, this Forbes one. The future of learning is radically decentralized. What's next for higher education? Forbes actually answered their own question a couple of months later, and we will come back to that. So yeah, stick a pin in Forbes, we'll come back to you. The third one's a big one. Moving out of the classroom now. Student data and student records being put on chain. Super, super important. Okay, when I said that every single industry is going to be affected by Web3, by blockchain, it's the truth. But it's not even just industries. Every single aspect of our lives will be disrupted and redefined in some way. If you're getting married, your marriage certificate will probably become an NFT. It will be stored on chain so that it is transparent and visible and accessible by anyone, anywhere, anytime, any place. Similarly, student data, student records will be stored on chain. So that if a student moves from one school to another school, or moves from a school to a college, or school to a university, that all of their data is instantly accessible and 100% transparent and authentic, because it's all stored on the blockchain. It's not, oh, we need to wait for the other school to send it to us, or, oh, we can't access your Google Drive. It is there, and it is an open book, okay? This is an inevitable thing, that all school student data will move towards a chain, and in general, we will see in the next 10 years this massive transition away from the cloud, okay, away from letting Google hold your stuff, to having everything on chain. Similarly, certification. Your GCSEs, your IBs, your degrees and diplomas. Jeremy, who I mentioned I originally delivered this presentation with, last year he went over to the States to collect his doctorate, first thing he did was take a copy of the paper certificate he was given, the only physical record he has that he is a doctor now, not a medical doctor obviously, but you know, he has a paper certificate. What if he'd lost that on the plane? What if there was a fire in his house, woe betide, but and he lost that piece of paper? He's then got to mess around getting another copy, jumping through hoops. We've all done the admin bureaucracy dance before. It can be a real pain. First thing he did was take a scan of it and upload it to his crypto wallet as an NFT. Not for sale, just that he has a permanent copy of it stored on the blockchain forever, indisputable, cannot be edited, cannot be changed. It is his degree. This is where the stuff that we were talking about before about always being transparent, always being accessible becomes really, really important. The provable authenticity of the issuing body as well is a really big thing. I was chatting to the Credly guys last year. So Credly have been around for a while, but they've started to dive down this blockchain rabbit hole about 12 months ago. And they're probably one of the leading examples right now in terms of digital certification on chain. Now you think about it. Say you're hiring an employee and you receive their LinkedIn page. You go on their LinkedIn page, you scroll down and it says, won this award from Apple, attended this course with Amazon, did this, did that, did the other. Does it mean that they really did those things? Can you prove? Does anyone check that stuff? LinkedIn has become the living, breathing resume of our generation, and yet it's like Wikipedia. You can put whatever you want. You can literally you can tag companies and nobody checks it. With Credly, what they do is they, on-chain, create digital certifications through companies like IBM did it with them last year. So when people completed that course, they were, through Credly, given the certification on-chain, and it integrates with LinkedIn. So it's on their LinkedIn that they completed this course or they received this award, but you can click on it and it verifies that this was issued by IBM. It verifies the date, the grades. You can even drill down and see the work that they did in some cases to receive that award, to receive that certification. So certifications in the education system moving towards being on chain, again, it's going to be a sure thing. It's going to be the standard, not the outlier. It's going to be all forms of certification stored and shared on chain. So another vertical that we can look at here is the teachers themselves. I haven't worked in many classrooms in my day, and always been a bit of a content creator, always been someone that, I like to make my own stuff. I would rather spend hours building funky resources than just go on a website and download them. But there is a whole industry built around, platforms like Teachers Pay Teachers, the TES, Twinkle, and these kind of things, where teachers are trying to supplement their incomes by sharing and selling the resources that they have created. And in a lot of countries, shock, ready for the shock, teachers don't get paid enough. Okay? In most countries, teachers don't get paid enough. Teachers in this country are very lucky to get paid what they get paid, but in most countries, they don't get paid enough. And so trying to supplement your income by creating resources and monetizing resources is totally reasonable. The problem is that what every teacher in the world also does is, if they get a cool resource, the first thing they do is they kick it across to everyone else that they work with. So it really limits the way that these things are monetized and it impacts the way that they're shared. By transposing teachers' resources to NFTs, we have the opportunity to empower teachers like never before by making them content creators that can actually turn a profit, by giving them the opportunity to create and to sell and market resources in a new way. And the royalty systems that's linked in with NFTs is super important here. So if you're not someone that's down the NFT rabbit hole, if you create an NFT collection, when you create it, you set a royalty on that collection. What that means is, maybe it costs $100 to buy your NFT, and somebody buys it, and they decide, and then suddenly it becomes really popular, and they decide they're going to sell it for $500. But there's a 10% royalty. So that means 50 out of the 500 go back to the original creator. And that is in perpetuity. Okay? That's in perpetuity. That's forever. And because it's on chain, it really is forever. And we have seen examples in the NFT space in the last year alone where collections that were created in 2017, and in some cases the teams have just completely walked away from, they've moved on, they're doing other stuff with their lives. Suddenly, someone like Gary Vee puts his archaeology hat on and goes, oh, I really like all these old classic collections from 2017, and they kick off and sell $1 million worth on the secondary market. Because it's on chain, those content creators are still making those royalties. And that is something that could really, really empower teachers, that you've created a resource in 2022, and in 2032, someone is still reselling the resource they bought off you. Maybe their curriculum has changed. Maybe they were working in an IB school and they've now moved to a British curriculum school. They don't need the IB resource pack anymore. So rather than just, oh, okay, I don't need that anymore, they actually list it and sell it on to someone else that's moving into the IB system and potentially wants that resource. They make their money back, or maybe potentially more than their money back, maybe a portion of their money back, and the original creator takes that royalty again and again and again. And as someone that has worked in the British school system in the UK almost a lifetime ago now, and had to do 5 hours of tutoring on a Sunday to make ends meet, I know how important this is for a lot of teachers in a lot of countries to have the ability to sell the content that they're spending their hard-earned time creating. In terms of teachers, the other interesting thing, I think, is the transition from PLNs to a DAO. Now, I did say at the start that I would touch upon what a DAO is, so let me just pit stop here and do a very, very, very quick, what is a DAO, okay? DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. We talked already about how Web3, blockchain is going to change the way that data is stored. The simplest way to understand this is it's like taking that concept of a group or a company where traditional kind of pyramid structure with a boss and then these people and everyone answers to somebody, and making it more decentralized, making it more collaborative. It's governed entirely by the individual members. The members make the decisions collectively. Depending on how many shares in the DAO you have, it depends how many votes you get in terms of decision making. The use of smart contracts on chain to execute the decisions. There is no authority, there is no CEO. It's fully autonomous and transparent. Now, a PLN is a personal learning network, sometimes confused with the term PLC, personal learning community. Now, your personal learning community is something that educators, it's groups that educators form up, whether in their schools or across multiple schools, where they take a deep dive into a topic. Maybe you're part of a personal learning community that's investigating the use of VR in the English literature classroom, okay? It's like a focus group for teachers. Your PLN is your personal learning network. Tends to be heavily reliant on social media these days. And you know, it's the network that you build of people where you share and gather resources and work together and solve problems and support each other. And I think that there is a lot of evidence that we're going to see a shift from PLNs to educational DAOs. And there is actually already one happening. K20 educators led by Avriti Sethi and a great guy, Michael Cohen, sometimes referred to as the tech rabbi. These guys, they're already kicking off what is the world's first educational DAO, the Ed3 DAO. I think you saw the tweet from the Ed3 educators earlier on referring to education and not doing enough to empower students about NFTs. This is the same group, okay? The idea of having a DAO that is guided by purpose, not monetarily focused, but educationally focused, is not governed by some regulation or remit. It doesn't matter what school you work in, doesn't matter what curriculum you work in, doesn't matter what your principal's saying. As a group, we're going to decide the direction of this. We're going to decide what we as a group can do to improve education. It's self-funded, it's self-sustainable, and I cannot recommend enough, if you're interested in this, that you look at K20 educators, because they really are breaking ground. And it's my pleasure to actually be doing some work with them starting next week to help them build out their curriculum for the Ed3 DAO. Springboarding from that, we can then think about school governance. Okay, the way that a school is run. Another aspect of education that really does need some innovation, it needs some renovation, it needs some disruption. And I think the DAO can be used in this regard as well. Okay, so for those that are not clear, you know, a board of school governors is who your principals, who your CEOs answer to. They're typically involved, but you've also tend to have stakeholders, maybe from the parent body, from the teaching body. Quite often the board of governors will include people from outside of the school community, other school leaders from other schools, or parents just from the broader community. By transitioning to a DAO type structure, there's a better chance that all voices can be heard, not just the loudest voice, not just the richest voice. There's greater potential for a broader range of stakeholders, more transparency and accountability, of course, and everything here always is underpinned by this. All of these things that I'm talking about, oh, we can move that to the chain, we can move that to the chain, we can move that to the chain. This is always part of the why. The fact that it's all going to be safer, more transparent, and more accountable. Another interesting one is school funding. And this recent headline caught my attention. Citizen School, first school in Dubai that's decided they're going to accept crypto payments. That will be interesting. Especially if the market's volatile on the day that the school fees are due. They could end up taking a payment that's worth this and then find out 10 minutes later it's worth this or this. As I said earlier on, guys, I really don't want to go too heavily down a rabbit hole in terms of crypto and decentralized finance and the like. But yes, it's the way school funding is organized. It is going to be affected by blockchain and DeFi. Let's face facts. And I would say crypto payments as an option for parents really is scratching the surface. It really just is the tip of the iceberg. I've seen some of the people involved in Michael's group have talked about the idea of public school funding being offset through DeFi, through using schools, school-based tokens to raise funds, to remove the pressure on government bodies to fund public schools, which is quite interesting, quite game-changing, and I'm sure it's something that a lot of governments would back. If basically they're saying, look, if you help us get this set up, you can lower taxes because we won't need as much money from you, which government's not going to want to be told by education, oh, well, we can lower taxes. That makes us look great. And in the middle here, you've got this tokenized access to education, which is a really disruptive idea. And it is the sort of idea that is just being thrown around right now as a what-if scenario. I think in the next year, we're going to see the first examples of schools playing around with this concept. And they will make mistakes. If you're at the tip of the spear, you always make mistakes. I've said this for years. If you are the person that's walking down the road for the first time, you don't see the potholes, but you get the opportunity to warn the people coming behind you, look out for that, look out for that. So it'll be interesting to watch some schools try to incorporate some sort of tokenomics, some sort of tokenized approach to education where students, rather than earning stickers for their shirts, again, kids love getting stickers. Don't get me wrong, I've given 1 million stickers out in my day, especially working with the little ones. And having worked with 4-year-olds through to, well, professionals, but in the education sector, I've worked with 4-year-olds to 18-year-olds. Nothing better than working with little ones. They're amazing. And they do love a sticker, but we go from stickers into digital house point systems with platforms like, or Yasmin, what's that platform use that you guys give points out? What's that called? bug me. In school, where you earn points with the little monsters. Maybe it's your younger brother. But there are digital platforms used where kids can be assigned points and it tracks points. That will transpose towards something that is actually on chain, tokenized rewards, where you're earning points, you're earning tokens. You spend these points to take assessments, you get your grades from the assessments. Educators could be in the same system earning tokens for their classes. They could cash them in to gain, you know, a free period or a week off or something. It's a really, really interesting concept that I don't think is going to evolve quickly, and I do think there's going to be some slip-ups on the way, but I do think that in the next couple of years we'll start to see schools exploring this as a concept. Number 9, tying back into the stuff with Predley, this perfectly makes sense, recruitment on chain. The idea that in every industry, recruitment will move towards using blockchain technology. Things like POAPs, this stands for proof of attendance, okay? How many times have you been to a conference and not printed off the certificate, or they've emailed you an attendance certificate or something like that and you didn't bother? There's not many people that have folders full of every certificate they've ever attended, you know, or badge from everything you've accomplished. Having everything on chain, stored in one place, from everything from resumes to certifications, having an authentic work history that is less fallible than, as I explained already, on LinkedIn. I could go on LinkedIn and say that I was the CCO of Apple for 3 years, and I might get my next job using that before anyone realizes it's not true. All professional development and training records, all of this stuff moving towards chain so that we have this decentralized approach to storing our data and making it accessible all the time, anytime, anywhere. And then number 10 is, of course, the Eduverse, the Metaverse. We're going to unpack this in the final chunk of this session after I've sat down with Yasmin for a little bit. There's loads to chat about here, and I really will dive into this topic in a lot more detail later on, including this chap here and who he is. Now, if you are standing at that intersection of Web3 and education and you want to learn more, the 3 best places to look are probably Twitter, Discord, and YouTube. Of the 3, Discord's possibly the one that you've not heard of or not used. It was for a long time just seen as a kind of Microsoft Teams for the gaming community. It has very much been taken under the wing of the Web3 community, and it is where most of the NFT communities hold their hubs for their groups. Twitter is the main social media home of NFTs. A lot of platforms do have Instagrams and stuff, and you would think that Instagram would be really big, but it's totally not. Twitter is where it's at. If you want to learn about NFTs, I really can't recommend enough diving in on Twitter. And YouTube, as always, is a great source for information. I'm going to give you a few specifics. I mentioned earlier on that I didn't go into DeFi and crypto and all of this stuff. If you really want to learn more about that, this is a great channel, Whiteboard Crypto. Okay, it's all animations that simply break down this stuff and make it really easy to digest and understand. And all of their videos are things like this. What is a blockchain? You know, what is DeFi? What is this cryptocurrency? What is an NFT? Really, really, really like that. Next up, I've mentioned him a few times. It would be unfair of me not to include him in here. My boy Jeremy, Dr. Jeremy. He was, as I said, an executive director, as high as you get on the food chain at GEMS over here. Walked away from it. Even had Sonny Varkey asking him not to leave personally. Still said, no, I'm going. And he quit, moved back to the States, and works as the community manager for a startup called Aspen, which is part of Monax, which has just launched its NFT marketplace. Jeremy still hosts the NFTs podcast. It's a brilliant podcast. It started out specifically looking at the intersection of education and Web3. It has evolved to include some more broader themes, but I honestly can't recommend it enough. He's a very, very easy guy to listen to. For 6 months, from the end of last year coming into this year, Jeremy and I were also hosting a Twitter Spaces show every week called Scam Busters, which was specifically about avoiding scams and hoaxes and the like in the Web3 space. Both of us coming from an ed tech background. You know, as I've mentioned, I've taught kids as young as 4 how to spot, you know, how to be safe online, how to spot dangers online. And it was shocking to me when I moved into NFTs to see how many people didn't understand basic principles of how to avoid phishing. That's phishing with a PH, obviously. Now, Jeremy and I actually, he got super busy when his platform launched and we stopped doing Scam Busters, but he actually tweeted at me publicly this morning saying, let's get the band back together. So keep your eyes peeled for that if you're interested. The Scam Busters, sounds like we're going to be getting the band back together and might ride again. If you do like your Twitter Spaces, keep your eyes peeled for Michael, who I mentioned from the Ed3DAO group, the tech rabbi, Michael Cohen. He's hosting a weekly Twitter Spaces interview. I've already been on it once as a guest. He has a guest from the education space, someone standing at the forefront of Web3 education on a weekly basis. The timing isn't great. I know, because I had to get up stupid o'clock to be on it for him. The timing isn't great for here, for this part of the world. 9 p.m. EST is like silly o'clock in the morning for us, but they are recorded if you're interested. So, oh, that's interesting. It's reformatted one of my slides. Anyway, we are going to take a short couple of minutes break now so people can pop to the bathroom and just so we can get set up. And we're going to, for the next chunk of the session, I'm going to bring Yasmin up and going to do a little interview with Yasmin. She's going to talk to you about her career with virtual reality, with VR, with NFTs and all the cool stuff that she's been doing. And you guys can get to know her a little bit before massive interview with her in Khaleej Times gets published next week and she becomes a superstar. Some of you may have seen her on Love in Dubai this week. She was on Love in Dubai being interviewed earlier in the week. So Yasmin's going to come up and we're going to talk about her projects. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes just to quickly go to the bathroom and then we'll start again with Yasmin. Okay? Cool. We're very lucky to have Yasmin with us. Yasmin is one of the most successful child NFT artists in the world. She is the most successful young artist in the country. Yasmin, I've known Yasmin's family for a few years now, and I kind of take responsibility for, well, leading you down this path. When I first met Yasmin, and you know, she was like 10, she was already an incredible artist. And at this time, I was playing around a lot with VR art tools and all these things. But my problem is that, to put it blunt, I suck at art. Okay, I've never been great at art. I love art, but I'm not very good at it. And what I learned when I was at Jess is that if you take these amazing tools and put them in the hands of someone that's very good at art, you can see these amazing creations. You can see the real potential of these tools. So Yasmin, firstly, thank you for giving up some of your Saturday to be with us. I'm sure that there are many, many other places that you could have been, but you're here with us. I know you're probably not used to speaking with a stick mic, and I know that I have got a mic on, okay, and they are recording the sound, so please do hold your mic up. Do you want to just check, guys? Can you hear her okay?
Hello?
You might actually need to turn the volume up for her, for the people at the back. I'm not sure if people are going to hear her.
Hello? Is that okay?
No, they're not going to hear her, guys. You're going to need to turn the volume up on that if you can, please. Try again. You're still going to need to be louder, I think. Can you hear her at all? Just about. Can you turn her up anymore? Or are you going to get feedback? She's not the most naturally noisy person. Try again. A little bit better, but you need to be as loud as possible, okay? Just get quick. Give us a 2-minute freestyle rap and we'll see how you go. No? Not for that? Okay. So Yasmin, yeah, thank you for being here with us. This is actually, although I mentioned already, you know, you've sat down, you were live on the Love in Dubai show this week. You've just done the big interview with Khaleej Times, which is going to be published next week. I know you've done interviews in the Web3 space with the Nifty Chicks and Crypto Puppy, people like that. But I was thinking about it this morning. This is the first time I've interviewed you for 2.5 years. The last time I interviewed you was inside VR for the Educators in VR conference in 2020. You remember that? Yeah. And you've come so far since then. So obviously, Yasmin, the first form of tech that I introduced you to was VR. Okay, I met you, you're an incredible artist. I was like, oh, you have to try this. You have to try Google Tilt Brush. You have to come and create something inside virtual reality for me. And this dress design, this was the first thing she ever painted. She was, I think, either 10 or 11, had never used a VR headset in her life, and knocked this out, which was 10,000 times better than anything I'd ever created in Tilt Brush, in about 3 minutes. And it was pretty clear that there was something there. So Yasmin, you've done, since then you've done a lot with VR and art, but what was it about virtual reality art that you liked, that you know, lit something up for you?
Like with VR, I've seen it from all the perspectives here, but the paper, I think things from all the just like in. In VR, everything like I can see of every player I'm doing. I can make so much with that.
And that's what I've said before, folks,
In terms of the whether or not, if people are saying, oh, you know, spatial computing, immersive technologies, it's just a fad. She's just literally put that into words for you. The fact that she likes the fact that she can move in the spaces and see her art from different directions, from different perspectives. So Yasmin, you started creating in VR. As we come into 2020, I think it was, early 2020, you were, yes, I know, I remember that I had you come, I was the coordinator and the host of the immersive technology stage guest at the World Trade Center, and I had Yasmin doing live art demonstrations. I'll show you a little clip of that in a second. And then off the back of that, you had your YouTube channel when you started creating all of this content. Where were you, what was inspiring you with all these different pieces that you were making?
Like most of it was my imagination. You know, sometimes like reading or I can just make anything, and all the brushes on the tools. I can make literally anything I wanted. So not social media kind of artists that I felt created, but most of all my imagination. And some of the brushes like effects I can play around with. That's what kind of like led me.
So you can see this clip here, guys. This is Jasmine at 11 years old.
I've turned the sound off on this, but painting live in front of a group, and this was not the only time she's painted live on stage. She's one of a very, very small group of artists that have had the opportunity to paint live inside the World Trade Center, DWTC. Yasmin, the headset that you've got on there, because of the logistics of setting it up, was actually my HTC Vive Pro, but you tend to use an Oculus, yeah?
Yeah.
Is that something that you find easier, or
Because
you don't go?
it's wireless, I can go anywhere I can go on my bedroom, I can go upstairs. And it's just very light, so I feel like I'm more in space, and so that's like wired.
So, what's the craziest place you've taken your Oculus and painted?
The beach.
The beach.
Yeah.
So you've stood on the beach.
Yeah, I was on the beach. It was like a idea that I had. It was a really cool image.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty fun. I had the waves background while I was drawing.
So if you want to see some of Yasmin's VR content, you can look up Yasmin VR art. Rather than just type the URL in, I recommend just typing on Google on YouTube Yasmin space VR space art, because not only will you find this content, but another former student of mine who also is she's very hot in the VR art space, called Lara. Lara actually created a short documentary film for the University of Southern California about Yasmin called Yasmin's World. And if you type Yasmin VR art into YouTube, you can watch that short documentary piece that Lara created for USC, and it's a really, really beautiful little piece. So I do highly recommend that. So that was 2020, pandemic, virtual reality. Then we ended up going in a very different direction, because as I've mentioned, guys, and I blame Jeremy. Jeremy led me down this rabbit hole of NFTs via NBA Top Shot, both of us being basketball fans. So, January last year, started learning what NFTs were, started exploring this space, started seeing some amazing artists do some amazing things, like Gong Yang, the creator of Ghosts. And obviously, I'm still close with Yasmin and her family, and I started suggesting it to her. I was like, you want to see this stuff? You want to see what people are doing here? It's amazing. You do this on your iPad. So that's what you did, wasn't it? So this was your first collection.
Was actually 100 teacups in total, and each teacup was different. It was rare. Some had one handle, some were two, some were teapots. That was very different and very rare each.
So she released this collection. She created this. You created this on your iPad. What was the app that you used?
I used iArtbook in the beginning, but then I kind of switched.
So yeah, so these were all made on an app, a free app called iArtbook on her iPad, okay, with an Apple Pencil. And in fact, Yasmin, that one up in the top corner there, that was either number 1 or number 2, wasn't it? That was one of the very first ones in the collection. And then some of these ones, like the Shakespeare one down the bottom, these are sort of in the last waves, because you put them out in 10 waves of 10, okay? And you can see a few more on this slide here. You obviously, like, you've got your Demon Slayer one up here. You've got a teapot one you just mentioned about teapots. And I know you did some collaborations as well, didn't you?
Yes, I collaborated with some artists in the music space, like Bakery.
You had Spiri from Per Evil, yeah.
I animated it to, like, it was really well.
So in this image here, you created the cup, and then he put the guy who was doing the gingerbread men collection put that into the cup.
Yeah, he actually did the teacup with the gingerbread out of it, but then I had a face of the teacup in the background.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, this was, I think you launched your first wave a year ago. We should look that up, because it could even be like to the day, but it was about mid-May that we minted your very first wave of these, didn't we? Okay, so about a year ago, she launched her first collection at 12 years old. How did it go?
It wasn't great, like it was starting out pretty good in the beginning.
Yeah, it wasn't going too bad. And then someone bought your stuff. Who was it that about wave 5, somebody bought some of your cups? Was it? Oh, sorry. All right. Yeah, wave 7. All right. In wave 7, who bought 2 of your cups?
Gary Vee.
Okay, so Gary Vaynerchuk, who is currently probably stood on a stage on the other side of the world for VCon. For those that don't know, Gary Vee is a massive figure, very influential figure in the Web3 space, just as he was in the Web2 space when he funded the likes of Twitter, and just as he was in the Web1 space when he opened one of the very first e-commerce stores. He's always at the forefront of technology, and he is huge in the Web3 space. He's probably, I would say, one of the sort of 3 or 4 most influential figures in the space, and randomly saw Yasmin and Yasmin's work and bought a couple. What happened next? Oh, 1 second, he didn't just buy them, did he? So then he starts talking about her on his tea with Gary Vee. Now I would include the clip. I've got an edited clip on my laptop of him saying it. But if any of you know Gary Vee, you'll know that he doesn't tend to get through a sentence without cursing several times. And he didn't. Let's just put it like this: he didn't just say that he liked these teacups. Yeah. I can't play this clip in Dubai and not get in trouble. So yeah, we'll just leave it at that. So after that, after Gary Vee had bought a couple, then what happened?
After he bought teacups and mentioned podcast,
How quickly did the next wave sell out?
minutes, right?
No, it was less than that. It was 15 seconds.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, the next wave sold out in 15 seconds because obviously people follow what he's doing. So you finished off this project, and what was interesting was early on, probably about wave 5, Yasmin was interviewed alongside another young artist called Nyla. Now again, if some of you are in the NFT space, you've possibly heard of Nyla Hayes and her long necky ladies collection, okay? Another amazing young artist, same age as Yasmin. They were interviewed together. Nyla got into the space a little bit earlier. She really struck gold by launching her big project on the same day that Ashton Kutcher tried to steal tons of liquidity from the space with a massive cash grab. And she was seen as the antithesis to the Hollywood celebrities trying to horn in on the space. So when Yasmin, when you finished this, you had seen what Nyla had done with her bigger collection, and you asked me, can we do something like that? And I said to you, yep, we can try and do something like that. I can't help you with creating a big generative collection, but I'm sure I can help you find the people to do it. And then I tried to convince you to do what? Peacocks, because animals were big at the time. It was all Amazing Bear Club this and Super Donkey Zoo that, and everything had to have an animal in it. And at the time I was working at Emirates Towers for New Media Academy, and if you've been to Emirates Towers, you know there's peacocks everywhere when you come in. So I've seen peacocks every morning and every evening. So I desperately tried to convince her, you're going to do peacocks, it's going to be amazing, everyone's going to love it, nobody's seen peacocks. And you even drew a few, didn't you?
Yeah, showing the face, like,
Yeah.
pictures.
But it was very clear to me, and I think to your mum, who's sitting at the back over there, that your heart wasn't really in it. And so you, being Yasmin, just sacked off the peacocks and come to me and said, I'm not doing peacocks, I'm doing my elf girls. Now, these are quite special to you, aren't they? This is something that's been around for a while, these kind of designs. So where did the idea for what became known as Elven come from?
Just I've been drawing for a very long time now. But I never have museum. I will draw it as an if I do art supplies, I'll draw an alphabet amount. Like I was around showing work and have some spare ketchup. So it was the first time it was into my mind. So I was like, I want to do that and it's something that I really enjoy drawing and passionate about. So
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the project in my life.
Fantastic, and I think that's super important. The fact that it's something that came from her heart and something that she'd been, been running around inside her brain for a number of years, not the peacock idea that I suggested. Still think it's $1 million idea. So Elven is obviously a little bit different to NFT cups. NFT cups, you drew them, you passed those finished images to me, and I minted them. I essentially added them to the blockchain for you. This was different because this was a generative project. So do you want to explain to these guys what that means to be a generative project, especially because I'm about to sneeze?
So a generative project features that you have different hairstyles, but different colors, and then like on different hairs, and then a smart contract. Then we put all this assets, and then the smart contract would generate a random elven, so it's a randomly generated piece. And randomly it wasn't selected, everything was like chosen to go into one piece.
What that means is that you can actually have millions. There were 6,000 Elven, but there could have been 10 million Elven, because if you've got a number of traits, you can combine them in so many different ways. This one here, this screenshot here of this work in progress of this, obviously a top. This one's kind of special, isn't it? Why is this one special?
We did it on a live art session, so I drew this on some other traits, and I changed the colors of it. I had two versions.
Yeah. So you can see that on this girl up the top here. You can see a black version of that top. So she drew that live on Zoom, and to this day, she's still doing live Zoom art sessions on pretty much on a weekly basis. I know we hosted one last week. This one, the Rachel from Friends haircut, that was another one that was done live on Zoom before the launch, wasn't it? So these traits were created with your community. That's amazing, yeah. Now, I've mentioned community there. Once you go down the rabbit hole of these bigger projects, it is more than just art, isn't it? There's a lot more involved. And this little montage here just shows you a fraction since the launch. And we didn't actually say that, Yasmin. When did you launch Elven?
My 13th birthday.
On her 13th birthday, okay, in last September. 6,000 pieces, and it sold out in a week, okay? And in the time since then, as I said, this is just a fraction of the activities of the community engagement that we've been involved with her community. Everything from raffles to charity stuff, which we'll come back to in a minute, to all kinds of creative competitions, to a special Halloween spin-off collection, to themed merch, to integration with an upcoming gamified DAO, all kinds of bits and pieces, collaborations with other communities, which again we'll come back to. It's a lot more involved than some people realise, Yasmin, isn't it?
It is, because like you can't support a community without engaging with people who are there for you. Because they were there for you, from the start, they were not invested in you. You got to do something back to them, how I thank you for being there.
Yeah.
And like, can't go to a community without engaging with them on a daily basis.
For sure. And one of the things, in parallel to the launch of the actual collection, there was also this special initiative and a partnership with the Make-A-Wish International, Make-A-Wish Foundation International. So we reached out to 12 prolific artists. Some of them I reached out to, but in most cases, these were people that were handpicked by Yasmin from all over the world. So Belu Draws is a young 15-year-old Argentinian artist. You've got someone like Swolf Chan behind the Mitsuki collection. You've got the Aswan collection from over in the Philippines. Spiridono, who's a great guy behind the Per Evil collection. He's based in Holland. Specifics from Acolytes, based in the UK. Technoveins is over in the States. Can't really see this one here, but I think she's Indonesia. So a real international cast of guest artists that created a special version of an Elven. And these were auctioned, Jasmine, weren't they? This was just after the launch. Okay, so as soon as the main project had launched, these 12 were auctioned with all the money going to Make-A-Wish. And it was around, in total, around just under 7 Ethereum. And at that time, it's also worth noting, Ethereum was worth a lot more than it's worth right now. Okay, it was about, at the time, that was worth somewhere in the region of about $28,000. Okay, which is 100% of that went to the Make-A-Wish International Foundation. And Yasmin, you then did some other bits and pieces for charity as well. Do you want to tell us about 1 or 2 of these, maybe, like this one at the top here?
So we're doing the one tree planted because we have 6,000 elvens. We gave them $6,000 to plant trees and like where wildfires are happening. You know, to help the ecosystem. And somebody in our community actually lived in that area.
Yeah.
And you know, some of our house like stuff burning down, and we were able to help them plant trees in that area. And it was really sweet because they were saying like, thank you for like helping me use that kind of stuff. I felt really nice.
And this one, I know this was something that you came to me and you said, look, we're doing something in school for Breast Cancer Awareness Day. And I know a lot of schools do that here. They do like Pink Day where you wear a pink shirt, maybe put a 10 dirham donation in or something. So you created some unique pieces and raised nearly $4,000 for breast cancer research as well. Then at Christmas, you were involved in this Right Click Give auction alongside well, Gary V and a bunch of other prolific collections.
Yeah, I remember actually like a sparrow, because that's really the book, The Little Sparrow. I remember
Yeah.
that. And I looked Little Sparrow for, because it was about refugees, and I wanted to help them, so that was a very connected to my Little Sparrow.
So is it important to you? Okay, this is in total here, guys, but this is a lot of money that a 13-year-old kid has essentially raised for a range of different charities. Is this important to you to keep finding new ways to leverage this technology to help people?
Like it's very important to help people, and you know, even if you help somebody, it just feels nice for yourself. Help them. And also like, because these people can need an opportunity to do something again. So, everybody deserves a second chance, and it's just very heartwarming when I do it.
And obviously it's been amazing for you to have the opportunity to step into this, you know, this emerging new technology, but also this emerging new community. Okay, you're part of the Web3 NFT community when 90% of people on the planet don't understand what an NFT is just yet. And you've had the opportunity to do all these crazy collaborations, not just those ones for Make-A-Wish. You've done all kinds of other collaborations. I've just got 2 up here. Obviously, I was showcasing my alien boy at the start. There's an alien girl that I own. I've got some alien girls as well, which is part of a special focus on female artists. Yasmin created this. That was live on Zoom as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was live on Zoom with both the Elven community and the Alien Boy community there. I co-hosted that with Howie. Shout out to Howie from the Alien Boys. And down the bottom here, we've got Monster Shelter, which was another one. This was a bigger collab, wasn't it? You drew this one on Zoom, but then there was also an actual collaborative piece. But I wanted to just showcase one other very cool collaboration with a project called ETHwalkers. And the reason I think this one is particularly cool, so ETHwalkers.io, it's an on-chain kind of RPG experience. If the art style looks familiar, it's that the artist from ETHwalkers is the Emmy-winning artist from the TV show Archer that is on Netflix. And through this collaboration, you can see there were official Elven merch t-shirts available for the characters in the game. was some of our squad. We fielded as Team Elven, a whole group, and actually smashed this game. And there are all these characters fighting off these zombies wearing Elven t-shirts. But that's Yasmin's work on top of the work of an Emmy-winning artist. That's pretty cool. Although you probably don't know what an Emmy is just yet. It's an award. It's an award. It's something for you to look up this evening. But yeah, shout out to Team Elven. That was how they looked at the end of it. But as cool as they got, as the team looked with Elven shirts on when they're alive, you've got to love how these guys look with their Elven shirts on when they turned into zombies. But we did have 17 survivors. But I think that's another really good example of how, you know, we not only leveraged a partnership with another project, but it gave extra incentive both to our community and to their community. And we're about to go into season 2 with them as well. And in season 2 is an even bigger partnership. There's going to be special Elven quests and different Elven merch. And there's going to be an exclusive Elven weapon. I don't know what that's going to be. Some sort of, you know, butterfly net or something. But there, yeah, some amazing stuff going on. Some amazing partnerships going on. And for you, Yasmin, oh yeah, again, the slides. Sorry guys, the slide, this laptop's not mine, and it seems to have reformatted some of these slides slightly. But for you, your success has extended beyond the NFT community. I've got just a couple of examples on here. Obviously, I've mentioned already the fact that you were on Love in Dubai this week. You can find that on Interview with Yasmin on all their social media channels. Bring a tissue, because when she is asked who inspires her and she starts talking about her mum, she breaks down in tears live on air. And then you end up with the hosts all like flustered as well. It's genuinely touching moment. And I've mentioned as well about the fact that this big interview, this big piece about you coming up in the Khaleej Times was going to be this week, obviously with the passing of Sheikh Khalifa. Obviously the newspapers have kind of pushed their timelines a little bit, but that is going to be published next week. I want to talk about this. You're a student at Heartland International School, yes? How did you end up at Heartland International School, Yasmin?
Scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have an action wallet. Now I have a scholarship. And honestly, I love it.
And being at Heartland has afforded you all kinds of other cool opportunities as well, not least of which was the fact that you got to go and speak at the British Embassy about entrepreneurship and about NFTs and things like that. But what other kinds of, just let these guys know, what other kind of projects are you into outside the NFT space? Because obviously you're a super creative kid. NFTs is just, you know, one thing that you've got your, you know, one pie you've got your fingers in, but there's lots of other things that you're exploring. So what other things have you been doing?
I am working on F1 in schools. It's like F1 but for like children. So like we are working on our car. It's happening in London. We're traveling in the beginning of summer with our team. I'm the lead with presenting our team. I'm the designer, media manager, and marketing manager. So
the F1 in Schools program, some of you may have heard of, you know, it's been running for many years, and it's interesting. So they're probably leveraging your experience in the NFT space to be their social media manager, as well as, you know, leveraging the art. So your experience in the Web3 space is now being something that you're being able to share through the projects that you're working on in the school. And I know you're involved in the Junk Couture project as well, the dress design. We've seen some of your virtual reality dress designs, and now you're moving into actual dress designs.
Yeah, pretty much work is really fashion and trash basically. And my dress is inspired by my works. The dress is made out of my paintings, but I sew them together to create like a very long loopy skirt.
Yeah.
I like a big butterfly in it, and like the top is a corset. And it's kind of inspired by Elephant as well.
And just this week, a company called Cybertribe actually offered to build Yasmin a virtual gallery for free, which is really kind of them. You can, this will be linked in that Khaleej Times article next week. You can actually scan that QR code and get into it. It's a little bit buggy on mobile phones at the moment, though. It works flawlessly on a laptop or on a PC. But you've got Elvens around the bottom, different forms of Elvens, and then some of your older teacups you can see up on the top, as well as a few one-of-one pieces and a few derivative pieces as well. You can see that Alien Girl piece there. Yasmin, what's next for you? What do you see yourself doing? If we jump forward, you're 13 now, what would you like to be doing in 10 years' time? And I know that's a super difficult question. I always remember when I went to secondary school, the very first assignment I was given for homework was write what you want to be when you grow up. And I hated it. And I got really upset. And I remember saying to my mum, how am I supposed to know? I haven't got a clue what I want to be. I'm 11. But where do you see yourself? What would you like to be doing in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? Do you see yourself continuing in the art world? Is the dress design something that you want to follow on? Are you going to be a social media manager?
Honestly, because I think the world changes every day. Every second is a new thing out, and that kind of makes my decisions different every day as well. But I would like to continue fashion. I've always enjoyed that. Like spare time, I enjoy drawing designs on paper. Like you're doing the chart, I'm enjoying it so much. And I just like making voices in design. I try to make talk stuff. I'm learning about fashion every day as well. That's I'm passionate about. Also, I'd like to continue being in the NFT world and the community. I enjoy people so much and things I do every day in it. I need to mix it both.
Okay. And to quote a regular saying in the NFT space, not financial advice at all, but just want to frame something. She's 13. She's had this much success already. She plans to go into the fashion world and become a designer. Because of blockchain technology, all of these pieces of art, all of those 6,000 Elvins are available right now. And they're on chain and they are date stamped. You can see which, you can go and look at an NFT cup and you can see that that was her first one-of-one collection. Elvin will forever be on chain as her first generative art collection. Now just think, in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, if she goes on to be the next, who's your favourite designer? I don't want to say someone and then you go, ooh. Okay, right. Well, say she goes on to be the next Stella McCartney or the next Victoria Beckham or the next, I'm thinking of names off the top of my head and I don't do fashion, sorry. The next person that makes generic black shirts. You get where I'm going with this. And this is what a lot of, I think, Yasmin's backers are doing. They're playing the long game. They're seeing the talent and the passion and the initiative from kids like her, from kids like Nyla, from kids like Bellu, who I mentioned. And they're thinking way ahead. They're thinking, what if I can put a small investment into this person now? And I'm thinking of their future. If they go on to be as successful as they have the potential to be, then what an amazing horse to have backed early days. Yasmin, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. Right, guys, we're going to do, I'm going to, thank you, Yasmin. I'm going to do one final chunk from me, and then I've had a few people asking about Q&A and questions. I will open the floor to questions as much as I can at the end. This last session, I was asked, obviously, to, as you would expect, to do Welcome to the Metaverse, to do something that's a bit more of a deep dive into the Metaverse, specifically the Metaverse as it relates to education. I know we already covered some of this in the first chunk, and in actual fact, that whole piece about what is the Metaverse, what does that mean, I had that in that first section, then I moved it to this section, and then I moved it back again. It really could have gone in both. In terms of me, obviously I've introduced myself already, but I just want to kind of really reinforce my experience in this specific area. As I mentioned, I've been working with immersive tech since about 2012, but it's a little bit more than that. In 2017, I hosted the first professional development sessions ever in the world inside VR. In 2018, I hosted the world's first global lesson inside VR with the co-founder of Pixar. So I was here in Dubai. Lauren was in his house with his Oscars in Los Angeles, and the students were elsewhere. And I took them to Mars, and I took them to a stone circle in Avebury, and then I dropped them into a lecture theatre, and the co-founder of Pixar, Lauren Carpenter, teleports in and starts delivering an awesome lecture about how he met Spielberg and how he met George Lucas and how Pixar was formed. And somewhere along the line, it turned into a lesson on quantum physics, and we all sat there a little bit confused, but it was still very cool. I've been a judge for the World VR Award since 2019. I coordinated the XR stage for guests, as I mentioned already. I actually keynoted the G20 in 2019, just before COVID kicked off over in Riyadh. That was awesome. And I've written for Forbes and VR Focus. I was interviewed in College Times last week. So I've been in this space for a long time. I'm not kicking all this up here just to show off, guys, but I do like to frame my experience, especially when we're talking about a topic that has suddenly become, as we've mentioned, a lot more of a buzzword. This is a space that I've been, it's a rabbit hole I've been down for some time. It's a space I've been working in for some time. Last year, I spent 6 months on retainer at New Media Academy, as I mentioned, working out of Emirates Towers. You may have seen this story across the press just under a year ago. It was their 1 year anniversary, and Rashid Al-Awadi, the CEO, he said, "Steve, I want to do something that's going to make some noise." I said, "Well, virtual, how about we build the region's first virtual reality campus?" So that's what we did. This was all over the press at the time. This is a fully customized virtual space floating on the orbit of Mars. As you can see here, we had avatars wearing Pandora, and there are some, you probably can't see them, but there are some female avatars down there wearing abayas. So that was last year. For me, hosting events inside VR, working inside VR has been something that I've been doing for a long time in all kinds of different platforms. There's lots of different virtual Steves, including some from platforms that don't exist anymore, like this one, where I'm holding Mini Steve. It was actually Facebook's original virtual reality platform that they since quietly retired. As I said, I originally had the slides here about what is the metaverse, but it just made more sense to put them in that first chunk, guys. So I moved them back to the start. I just want to reinforce what I was saying back then, though. This concept of the metaverse, we are talking about something that's persistent, connected, multi-user, and there does need to be a virtual reality component. It should be something that is experienced inside VR. Now, virtual reality for learning is where I want to start with this before we head towards the metaverse. Let's just actually focus on VR as a medium for education, for learning. And at this point, I do want to do a little bit more terminology demystifying. Over the last 5 to 10 years, one of the most common things that people have said to me is they don't understand the difference between AR and VR. And the way I explain it is like this: import and export. Augmented reality is import. We're importing digital content into the real world. Pokemon Go, Snapchat filters where it puts stuff onto your face. I've got a million AR apps on my phone that I can, drop a car into this space, a digital model of a car. Whereas VR is export, where I'm exporting myself into a digital world. Both terms form part of what's referred to as the virtuality continuum. This model by Paul Milgram from the 90s is still widely regarded in the immersive tech space as the original standard. Milgram's model went from reality to virtual reality. It had this area in the middle, which he referred to as mixed reality, which included augmented reality and something you've probably never heard of, augmented virtuality. I'm not even going to go down that path right now. What then happened was the waters around this term, MR, mixed reality, got really muddy. Microsoft liked this one because it had an M. Just like Apple liked words that start with A, Microsoft loved words that start with M. So Microsoft started calling all of their headsets and everything they were doing mixed reality, even if it was just a straight VR headset or had nothing in common with any of this tech at all. At the same time, you had all of these YouTube streamers who were putting green screens behind themselves and using special camera rigs to put themselves inside games, and they were calling that mixed reality. And they kind of won out, and at this point, this term mixed reality has kind of died off a little bit, and it's been superseded by XR, or extended reality, okay, as a blanket term for everything from AR to VR. And I think we can pretty much write augmented virtuality off for now. I think this term is just too unfriendly to our mouths to ever be popular, augmented virtuality. If you can get that out 3 or 4 times on the trot, fair play to you. So XR become the really popular blanket term to mean all types of headsets, all types of immersive technology, all types of spatial computing, all right? All of these terms have become a bit more interchangeable. Of course, then Apple knocked out a phone called the XR, which didn't help, but it still seems to be that XR is becoming the more popular term. Rather than companies saying, we do AR and we do VR, they'll tell you we do XR. And lots of companies that were blank VR have since rebranded themselves as blank XR. Okay, so that's where the terminology goes in that regard. Oop. Apologies. Now, as you can expect, I've been working with this tech for a long time and in lots of different forms. You can see some examples here from my days at Jess, as well as some examples from other schools I've worked with as a consultant, using everything from mobile headsets where you had to put your phone inside, which basically died out at this point, to standalone headsets like the original Vive Focus. You've got the original Vive there, the original Oculus Quest, now Meta Quest. All kinds of different headsets, all kinds of different experiences. To be honest, if you really want to see a taste of the work that I was doing, especially in that period between kind of 2017 to 2019, this is still the best example I can give you. If you go on YouTube and type in Ramadan VR, in 2018, I put this project together at Jess, which was 7 different year groups of kids from 4-year-olds to 17-year-olds, 7 different groups, 7 different headsets, 7 different projects, 7 different experiences, all relating to Ramadan. Okay, it includes a look at a special R&D virtual reality book tech that Alvin sent me over from China, and it's still never actually been publicly released. But I had some 15-year-olds playing around with it. But yeah, if you're interested, yeah, it's well worth a look. I still, to this day, this is the video I direct people towards if they're interested in educational VR, because it shows the different levels that you can access. So I was doing all this stuff when I was at Jess, and then I was going into schools, and there was a lot of interest around VR in education and integrating VR. And as I said to somebody earlier on, it got to the point for me where I would speak at VR events and be referred to as the education guy, and I'd speak at education events and be referred to as Mr. VR or the VR guy. But just as I was pushing this stuff forward, there were these really, really strong barriers to adoption. These 5 in particular, and to be honest, I could do a whole workshop around each one of these, so I'm really just going to skim past them. But for me, the 5 big barriers to mass VR adoption were lack of understanding, people not even getting the point of VR, the fear of the costs and the return on investment, and wondering whether it was just a gimmick. Is this worth us investing in? The procrastinators worried about the rate of change. Oh, we're going to buy this and a new one will come out next year and then it'll be a waste of money. Health and safety concerns. That was an interesting one for a time. But for me, this was always the most important thing. And that goes back to what I was saying before about my love of Simon Sinek, and my focus is always on why. When I started consulting, I would go into schools, they'd be like, oh yeah, so we're going to get a VR lab and we're going to do all this cool stuff. And I'd be like, hey, hang on a minute, you've got Office 365 and none of your staff know how to use it. Maybe we should do that first. They wanted shiny, they wanted quick, they wanted some headline grabbing, we've done this in the metaverse, we're going to do this in the metaverse, which is the current trend. But for me, it was super important that I could stand on stages and say, I've been doing all this amazing stuff with virtual reality because, and then have a really clear explanation of why I was doing it. And in my time, I've created graphics like this, which I debuted at, I guess, 2018 or 2019, talking about the different benefits of VR in education. From the fact that we can break the laws of science, we can break the laws of geography, we can go backwards and forwards in time, we can step into other people's shoes and boost empathy. The fact that headsets focus your students because they are not distracted by the other things going on around them. I always remember standing on stage at GITEX in 2017 talking about just this, an earlier version of this, and accidentally saying, oh, you know, there's an experience where you can bring an augmented reality experience, and you can bring a dog, a virtual dog into your classroom. But I've done this with students, and then what happens is their friend thing tries to get into the picture, and they're trying to do silly things. I said, but in virtual reality, it's different. It's just you and the dog, and you can do whatever you want to the dog. And I said that on stage at GITEX, and then realised I said it, and I was like, yeah, let's rewind that one. But it's true, you know, you've got much more focus inside VR. But this isn't enough. Some people, they want something that's familiar. So okay, right. So then I went down a path of looking at educational models, and how Ruben Puentedera's Samia model, how VR really sits at this higher level, this redefinition level, because it does allow you to create learning experiences that were previously inconceivable. Like Dale's clones of learning, which I know has been massively debunked since and not as widely used anymore. But if you're a fan of Dale's, yes, awesome. We are at the stage where we are actively participating, that we are engaging at the higher levels. And then Bloom's taxonomy, still probably the most used / overused educational model that there is in terms of breaking down and deconstructing how we learn. I did a real deep dive with this with a few friends of mine, because there was around 2018, 2019, there was a lot of people saying, well, VR, all VR is just, you know, it's just passive. People just put a headset on and you just look around and that's it. And it was clear to me that they didn't understand the true power and purpose and potential of virtual reality. And when we dove into this, it became very clear that this level, you could actually shave it off of the model. I didn't dare do it because the whole education community would have come from my head. But I did, you know, do a deep dive into how Bloom's taxonomy related to virtual reality. This is one of my all-time favorite in VR photos. I can't remember why I put the bear on the stage. It's the honest truth. I remember I brought the bear on stage for something, and I've just ended up with this lovely picture. It's a little bit dark in here with the lighting, unfortunately, but yeah, me stood on the virtual stage talking about Bloom's taxonomy with a bear. Random picture. But for a lot of people in the education sector, it's data. They want data. Where's the studies? And when I was on stage in 2017, 2018 talking this stuff, that was the problem. People say, oh, well, what data is there to support this? There isn't any yet, because it was too new. But over that period from 2018 through 2019, 2020, there were more and more studies conducted all around the world about the true power of virtual reality. And people like myself and Alvin, Chris Madsen, Daniel Dubosky, people that were really at the forefront of VR in education, we started connecting the dots. Let me show you what I mean. So this was a study from Cornell University in the States. They did 3 groups of students, one in VR, one with 2D learning, and one with practical. And they found 78% of students tested said they preferred VR. Make sense? It's new, it's shiny, it's cool. Wow, yeah, awesome. That data on its own doesn't do very much. But let's connect to the next dot. So Warwick University in the UK, they tested 3 groups, VR, video, textbook, and their researchers found that the positive emotions were rated higher for the group using the VR experiential method, and they also performed better, showing that the active interaction with the VR environment helped improve the learning. So let me rewind. Students said they preferred VR. A different study found that there was more positive emotions, and that led to students performing better. Saga University in Japan did a neural study, and they found that the use of virtual reality improves students' concentration by up to 6 times. But that makes sense, doesn't it? Of course they were concentrating because there were more positive emotions and they enjoyed it more. When you like something, you engage more with it. It makes sense. Let's keep connecting the dots. And bear in mind, we've already gone now for studies from America to the UK, now to Japan. We then go to potentially the most awesome name for a university ever, Beijing Normal University. Not sure why they needed the word normal in their university name, but fair play to them. I generally refer to it as Beijing University. Their studies found that VR significantly improves students' retention of learning, retention of information, which makes sense. Because if you're concentrating, you're going to remember what you've learned. And if you're enjoying it, you're going to concentrate. The dots all connect together. Then Beijing Foreign Studies University looked at language learning in VR, and they found that it improved the results by up to 2 times, but the student confidence levels in applying what they'd learned up to 10 times, which makes sense because they were concentrating, because they were because they were retaining what they learned, because they were concentrating, because they were enjoying themselves. All of these studies point towards the same potential, the same impact, and all of this was reinforced by the study in 2020 that PwC conducted. Okay, this was with in the business world, and this was with executives and business leaders. And their study, they looked at classroom-based, e-learning, and virtual reality solutions for soft skills training. But look at the results. This is the 4 key results from PwC study. Faster to train, more confident to apply the skills, more emotionally connected to the content, i.e. more focused, more engaged, and then here, 4 times more focused than those using e-learning. This reinforces all of those pieces that I'd spent a couple of years finding the best studies and connecting the dots, and then PwC come out and basically went, yep, that was right. But for me, this sums it up. This is Tom. He's a legend. The grandfather of VR. He now works at, he runs the lab, the VR lab at Washington University. Tom's been working with VR since the 60s, for real. I once got the pleasure of interviewing Tom inside VR. I interviewed him for 2 hours straight. After 10 minutes, I said, Tom, I'll just stop you. I turned to the audience and said, does anyone else feel like he's come from the future? Because he was describing stuff he was doing in the 80s that most people wouldn't think was possible now. He designed a lot of the heads-up displays that that fighter pilots use these days as well. But Tom, I once asked Tom for a quote. I asked 100 people working in the education and VR sector for a quote about VR. And Tom gave me my all-time favorite quote, which is this. In essence, being in a virtual world is like writing on the brain with permanent ink. And that, to me, sums up all of that data succinctly. There is something about being in a virtual world that creates an emotive response, a visceral response, unlike anything else. And I would throw you right back to the start when I was saying Fortnite and Minecraft are not the metaverse, because they will not create that same response that you get when you're inside an actual metaverse, when you're inside an actual virtual world. And at that point, let me just dovetail towards this. And at this point, I suppose COVID comes into play, doesn't it? COVID was an interesting one. Schools were closing, students were learning remotely, budgets were all reallocated. VR equipment that schools had spent money on all got stuck in a cupboard. You know, if they had a VR lab, it was closed because the kids couldn't, even if the kids were in school, they weren't allowed to touch equipment that other people were using. But digital innovation really kicked off and the baseline was raised. All those schools that had no idea that they were using Office 365 or Google, but didn't really use them properly, they suddenly had to learn how to use them better because otherwise they couldn't teach. They also realized, I think most people realized, how much we don't really like Zoom and online meetings, especially lots of them. So people started looking to the future and what's next. And the XR industry really flourished. You know, off the back of that same year, we had the Oculus Quest 2 launch and sell out multiple times. You know, the sales of headsets when people were stuck indoors went through the roof, and it did open up new opportunities. And one thing that we did start to see in the education sector is a shift from schools being interested in discrete lessons taught with VR to education inside of the metaverse. And this picture here is quite a telling one because I took that photo. Again, it's a little bit unclear with the lighting in here, but I took that photo. In fact, I took all of these pictures. This was the launch of the Victory. At the time, it was called, it was called, already been rebranded to Victory XR. It was originally Victory VR. This was the inauguration event, the launch of Victory XR Academy, the first Metaverse school. Okay, Victory XR, run by a guy called Steve Grubbs. Great guy. I had him on my virtual reality chat show back in 2018 inside this platform that I use called Engage. Steve loved it, white labeled it from them, and started building a full academy, which he called the Victory XR Academy. At that point, they'd been Victory VR and they built all these cool VR experiences, but he was moving from discrete experiences to this idea of a metaverse. And this was the inauguration event. They had Wendy there, who's an award-winning science teacher. She delivered this lesson, interactive lesson about the human body. It's a really cool session. You flash forward a year, and Morehouse College in the States, from the first college that actually started delivering full classes inside VR, working with Victory. Okay, that's Forbes. Remember, throwback here. Remember I said Forbes had that question about the decentralized future. Where are we going in education? They answered their own question. This was where we're going, and you'll see Forbes pop back up a third time in a moment. Let me give you a little taste of what this looks like, because what Steve and the team at Victory have done is spectacular. It really is. Just last week, someone who works at Morehouse shared this on LinkedIn. This was the, last week was the first class is, I think, I would call it graduation, but I think they call it something else. Is it commencement? But it's like the graduation ceremony was held inside VR for that first cohort. What's next? Forbes again. 10 of these opening in the next academic year. 10 metaversities opening in the States in the next academic year. Now, it's quite interesting that it's higher education where this seems to be focusing. And I think that there are some really key reasons why higher education seems to be moving on this first. And the logistics is really the heart of it. Older students are a lot easier to onboard when you're talking about headsets and VR. Okay, they're quicker, they're more mature, they're going to be safer with the equipment. It's also relevant that the lecture format of universities is a lot easier to transpose into virtual reality. That's not to say that what Steve and the Victory guys have built is all passive and didactic. You know, you've seen examples in there from the science labs where it is practical and hands-on. I think funding and grant programs in the States does play a factor. And I also think that the lingering fear around the potential obsolescence of higher education has played a role. You know, a lot of higher education institutions are worried that they're going to be made obsolete or they're not going to be relevant anymore. Similarly, the impact of COVID on international enrollment. People aren't traveling abroad to go to university anymore for fear that they're going to get stuck there. And from the other side of the coin, XR companies, they love working with universities. It's great to be able to say, oh, we did this project with a school, but it's a whole other thing if you can say, we did this project with Stanford. Okay, as soon as you say like Stanford, Yale, UCL, any of these big colleges around the world, that is something that they can put on their homepage and they can brag about. So there's definitely a desire to push into higher education. And again, thinking about our why. Why are they doing this? Why not just keep using VR for the odd lesson here and there? Why try and transpose the entire educational paradigm into this metaverse concept? Well, you can save a lot of money by building virtually. Okay, you want to build a science lab in your new school or your old school, it needs to be renovated. It can cost a lot of money. It's a lot cheaper to build a virtual science lab, and you can have infinite desks, you can have infinite space, you can have infinite resources. It also means obviously it's accessible to students worldwide. You can supercharge engagement. We've already talked through the benefits of VR for learning when there was a reason that I did all that first. You can tap into a network of master educators. And I know with these sorts of things, you know, accessible to students worldwide, you can use a global network of educators. Yes, technically you can do that with Zoom classes as well. But there is so much more benefit to using immersive experiential learning experiences like the ones afforded by Victory. And I think this is really important. Now, Jeremy Bailenson at Stanford is actually conducting a study right now, basically comparing learning in VR to learning on Zoom. And just yesterday, somebody from Engage shared some data, shared a brilliant quote from that, but I didn't have time to graft it into this. But they were exploring how powerful the impact of learning in VR is over time, and it's really interesting data. It's so fresh off the fresh off the line that I don't have access to it to show it to you right now. But it is something you could look for online. You can also obviously access learning experiences which are not possible in reality. We're in a classroom. We're learning about ancient Egypt. Okay, I've given you the instructions. I've talked to you about how the role that the canopic jars played in the embalming process in ancient Egypt. Fantastic. Now walk through this door, guys, and we'll walk through this door and we'll be in an ancient Egyptian tomb. And you can go and look at them for yourself, and you can explore them and take the lids off, and you can look at the differences, and we can have an impossible experience literally through the door of our classroom. Now, so far, the focus, oops. No, go back one. Back. There we go. So far, a lot of the focus has been around higher education for the reasons that I just outlined. On this slide, I was hoping to show you a video which doesn't seem to want to play. It's possible this laptop doesn't like the file format. Okay. You want me to press play? No, it's not having it. Obviously, this laptop doesn't like the codec. Sorry, guys, but just literally this week on Monday, I was talking to the CEO of this company, Optima, based in Florida. They've become the first virtual learning platform completely funded by the Florida Education State Department, and they are authorized to deliver their curriculum entirely inside virtual reality, again using Engage. I had a lovely little clip of it running there. What's interesting here is this is with grade 3 students to grade 8 students, much younger. They are moving from higher education, and now these types of companies are looking at younger students. And the students that they're looking at, they're like Yasmin, and like Yasmin's younger brother and other 10-year-olds that I'm sure you've been interacting with. These kids grew up on Minecraft, Roblox, and Fortnite. 3D worlds make sense to them. What's really interesting is with that plank experience, if you put a kid on it, they're much more likely to just kind of walk out because they're like, hey, you know, what's going on here? And yet my dad is a builder. He spent his life on rooftops. He couldn't do that plank. He was all wobbly-legged. But for kids, it makes sense. Now, I just wanted to finish off here, just touch upon this, because as we said earlier on, there's a big misconception around Web3, the Metaverse being the same thing. And people are often asking now, like, well, where do NFTs fit into all of this? And there is a lot of hype around NFTs and the Metaverse. And we do need to be somewhat cautious here because there's a lot of money involved. 5 Metaverse games, don't miss out. Yeah. What makes these Metaverse games? Because the assets are NFTs? Does that make it the Metaverse? Top 5 picks in Metaverse projects. People, content creators, influencers, they know how to use SEO. They know how to use buzzwords to get views and to get traction. And with companies like Adidas, you know, dropping things called into the metaverse and all this focus on NFTs and virtual merch, there's a lot of hype around NFTs being integral to the metaverse. Land in particular, with the sandbox as an example, you know, people buying plots of land. Oh, Snoop Dogg lives there, so I'm going to buy a plot of land. This is one of the things that gets me. All of the land around celebrities in these platforms like Sandbox and Atari, you know, some of these bigger ones. If Snoop Dogg owns this big chunk here, the land around it suddenly becomes more valuable as an asset. That to me highlights the discrepancy between the two different groups here, and the fact that people who are screaming metaverse, metaverse, metaverse don't actually understand it. I'll let you in on a secret. If you're inside a virtual world and you want to go to another virtual world, you teleport there. You don't walk out the door and then walk down the lane. And people that are buying land next to Snoop Dogg or next to Adobe or next to Gucci because they think that they're going to get this some sort of peripheral, oh, people are visiting Snoop and then walked out and happened to see us. It's not going to happen. People will teleport straight into Snoop's land if they have access to it, and they teleport straight from there to McDonald's and straight from there to somewhere else. There will not be, it's not going to work like a mall. You're not going to get the rub by having land next door. And I also think it's important that a lot of the land that is being sold right now is based on this what's called voxel type model, this blocky Minecraft, Roblox kind of vibe. I would remind you what I showed you earlier on from Alvin. You know, the metaverse and the Web3, they are not the same thing. And Bailenson from Stanford, you know, I've been lucky enough to interview Jeremy inside VR, but Jeremy, right the way through our interview, he kept hitting the same thing, the same point, drilling the same point home. And in his book, it's the central tenet of everything is this word, presence. This is the most important thing. This is the epitome of virtual reality and how virtual reality is an evolution above traditional media. The fact that virtual reality can give you that true sense of being somewhere other than where you physically are. This was the top level in my depths of virtual reality model, which I originally published in 2017 and has since been used in a number of universities. Okay, you can see it over here. This was the revised version, I think, from 2019, with presence over here being, you know, where we're aiming to get. And you cannot achieve that, I don't think, inside something that looks super cartoony. Here's that plank again. And there, I did promise he'd make an appearance. There's my old boss, Mark Steed. The dude has got 3 master's degrees from 3 different leading universities. One of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. Could not walk on that plank. Could not put one step on this virtual plank, even though I was stood in the room next to him, shouting at him, saying, it isn't real. And I think that's quite telling about the power of that experience. If this experience had looked like Minecraft, I don't think it would have had the same emotive impact on him. Okay, so just bear in mind, there is a lot of hype around projects which have been put together relatively quickly and enable people to build inside them very quickly because of the way that they build in cubes. But in the education sphere, I don't think we're going to be looking for experiences that look cartoony and look like this. I'm going to see if this video plays. This was published last week. This is not video footage, this is VR footage. Okay, using Unreal Engine 5, an independent developer, not a massive studio, one guy on his own over in Japan built this as a tech demo using Unreal 5. It is a virtual reality demo. It is so, again, it doesn't show super clearly because of the light in here, but if you can find it online, it is so shockingly realistic. And the second I saw this, I was like, that's the metaverse. That's what we think of. We think of the Matrix. We think of a digital copy of the real world, but one where the rules don't apply, one where I can you know, teleport from one space to another, one where I can pick a car up. But we do want it to be super high definition, super realistic. We don't necessarily want it to look like a cartoon. I'm not saying that that can't exist, that can't be relevant. There's definitely space for it, and there's definitely space for it in the gaming community in particular. But there's a reason in 2017 I chose Engage as the platform that I was presenting in, because it was the most realistic one. And then my friend Chris Madsen on stage in an evolved version of it last year. Or Alvin on stage at the Vive Developers Conference, mimicking the moment in the birth of cinema, when with the train's arrival in the station, where everyone in the first ever cinema freaked out and ran out because they saw a train on a screen. Alvin actually played that clip and then had a train burst through the virtual screen. There's a reason that professional companies and in turn educational companies are looking at platforms like Engage for their metaverse, because we do need it to be somewhat more realistic, more mature, to enable students to focus and treat it seriously and not see it as a game. So NFTs in the metaverse, I do think it's important we understand that they're not mutually exclusive. Another thing I think is super important is that younger students, the younger kids are, the more there's an issue there, the more there's a friction point around access. All these NFT gamers, NFT games companies now, they keep making a lot of noise around, oh, look at how many players Roblox has got, look how many players Fortnite's got, and we're going to do this in the NFT space. It's going to be $1 billion project. But what they don't talk about is the fact that such a high percentage of all these people playing Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite and all these types of games, a lot of them are quite young. They're probably younger than they should be even accessing it. We're talking about 9, 10, 11-year-olds. It's a very different beast when you're talking about suddenly giving them access to cryptocurrency or doing KYC. Very interesting times ahead in the intersection between the original forms of gaming and what's evolving as, you know, crypto gaming or Web3 gaming. I do think that there's space for NFTs to be used inside the education system, but I do believe that the bigger benefits will be the ones that I spoke about earlier on. Tokenized access, rather than using them for avatars or for wearables. I don't think that, in the same way that kids go to school now, they wear a school uniform, I don't think it's going to be as relevant to give kids access to a wide range of different clothing options inside a classroom setting. You think about it. I'm teaching my class in the metaverse. I don't really want Johnny to rock up with a giant pair of angel wings and, you know, a flaming gun spinning above his head and a purple face, distracting everybody around him, potentially blocking their view. Okay, if he wants to put that outfit on and go and run around with his friends in a game afterwards, fair enough. But there will be some degree of control that needs to be kept inside educational metaverse spaces. And maybe, guys, maybe pretty soon everyone will be on stage with a bear. And hopefully some of us will remember why we had the bear there with us in the first place. If you're looking to research this topic, I honestly cannot recommend Experience on Demand by Jeremy Bailenson enough. But if you're looking for another great read by a different Jeremy, know a good friend of mine, Jeremy Dalton from PwC UK, his book Reality Check is a great dive into how immersive technology can be used in a business setting. Guys, that is me. I think I've been talking for long enough now. If you want to connect with me, I will leave this up on the screen. I always reply to emails. I live on an inbox of 0. These days, I tend to be more active on my Desert Minter Twitter account than on my Steve_Banbury one. You can always get me on LinkedIn as well. It has been a pleasure. Thank you again to the In5 guys. Thank you again to the In5 tech team for hosting. I'm going to take my little dongle before I forget that, because I know that's what I'll do. Thank you to the Assembly for inviting me to be here with you today. It has been a pleasure, as I say. And I did say that there would be a chance for Q&A now. I know some people have probably got stuff to do and we have overrun. So if you need to go, by all means, run away. If you want to ask me questions, by all means, ask me questions. and I will attempt to answer as many questions as I can until I collapse. So if anybody has questions, yeah.
So how easy is it to start creating content? Is there something like no code that you can grab objects in the world, or do you have to create everything from scratch?
It depends how much flexibility you want. So platforms like Engage, which I've shown you a few times there, you know, Engage has got thousands and thousands of 3D assets, and you can go in and you can build out a space inside VR. I can build a space, and if I want to, I can, you know, I can work with the Engage team, and like what we did with the New Media Academy last year, and they wanted a custom space floating here outside Mars, and then I said to them, right, we need Arabic teapots, and I want the triptych with the 3 sheikhs to go on the wall, and we want UAE flag.